3. We're live, Mr. Wade. Good night, Belizeans at home and abroad. My name is Leonard Brackett. I will be your host for tonight's program of the Belize Affairs Show, and that will be number 265. 265. We're running like if we have a marathon race that we're trying to
Mhm.
get to the tape.
Yes,
But
sir.
the marathon race gonna come to a halfway stage in another few days, and after that we can continue the marathon, but at a different pace,
Yes, sir.
with different sense of urgency, but with the same agenda. That is to try and help inform our Belizean people at home and abroad who listen to our shows when it's live, as well as those who listen to the show after the fact on their own timing. We hope that tonight's program will accrue some positive public benefit to those who spare their valuable time to check us out. Uh, I'll do a word of caution for right now because I don't know if I want to take it later on or afterwards. So I'll just do that right now, Mr. Wade.
Oh, sure.
I had
Go ahead, Leonard.
I had taken the liberty of asking Mr. Wade and Gregory Brackett, Mr. Roody Wade and Gregory Brackett, to absent themselves from tonight's particular show because I was coming on the show tonight being the chairman of the program and having an agenda that I wanted to pursue. And I knew I'm expecting that at some point in time I'm going to be getting so hot under the collar and I'm going to be dealing on saying things about different issues and different persons that I did not wish or wanted for them to be smeared with and or having to be looked upon as having been culpable for participating in what I'm about to get into. That's a fair warning for those who have not seen this show before. That is that we inform, we educate, we show and tell, and we do a whole lot of different things, all with the idea of preparing our Belizean people to deal with the jackals, hyenas, vampires, vultures, and whatever else not that we have to be dealing with as a people and country. And for that reason, as I'm saying, I have taken the liberty to ask Mr. Wade to not allow himself to be tarred with what I'm going to carry on with tonight, especially since I'm going to be talking about some matters that are still before the court and others that have been dealt with by the court. He should not be put in a situation where he would be on this show having to participate or participating in any of the things that I'm intending to indulge myself in. Nevertheless, he offered to do the reading for me so that while he's doing the reading, I can launch the other part of the program so I don't have to ask the public to bear with me for a minute or two to launch the other part of the program and have that air. So thank you very much, Mr. Wade, for
Thank
volunteering to
you.
do that, sir.
Not a
And as
problem.
I'm saying, this is a fair warning to all who have listened before and to those who will be listening tonight. It's a no holds bar program for tonight. And I know a lot of people are going to be offended in terms of political minded people. I know some lawyers are going to be offended. I know some judges are going to be offended. I know the Prime Minister and his cabal of merry makers are going to be offended. And I could care one less hoot about it. We're in the silly season, and I too have a right to be silly. So tonight is my silly night. Thank you very much, Mr. Wade. I'll go ahead and offer a short word of prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Wade. Divine loving Father, thou who art our Creator, and the Creator of heaven and earth, and everything that in them are, I pray that those hear our prayers tonight. I pray for myself in particular, Lord. Thou knowest my heart, my desires, my most secret thoughts. Thou knowest the travails and trials and tribulations that I'm undergoing on a personal level. And the burden and concern for the well-being of my country. Please bless our Belizeans at home and abroad. Please bless our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, brothers, sisters, wives, and all our loved ones, loving Father. Don't them all. Please bless our country of Belize, its people and leadership. Please be merciful unto them. Please grab a hold of our leaders and make them do what they have refused to do. That is, to do right by our people and country. Loving Father, we pray that thou must bless this country of the United States of America as well, and the rest of humanity, and in particular those people who are in war zones, those people who are suffering from hurricane, tornadoes, uh, and all other manner of disasters, including those people in Ukraine who are being bombed and killed gratuitously. Loving Father, please be merciful unto us, we pray for us, His mercy in Jesus' name. Amen. I yield back, Mr. Wade.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonard.
You're welcome,
Uh,
sir.
it's always a pleasure to sit in your company, Leonard. You know, thank you for that warm prayer, and welcome again our viewers and listeners to our Belizean Affairs Show number 265. Um, with that said, I want to go straight to it because of time. I'll go to a reading from Matthew chapter 15, 1 to 10. It reads, Then Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat. He answered them, And why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God commanded, Honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if anyone tells his father or his mother, what you would have gained from me to give for me is given to God. He need not honor his father. So, for the sake of your tradition, you have made void the word of God. You hypocrites! Well, did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, This people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of man. And he called the people to him and said to them, Hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a person. Then the scribe came and said to him, Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? He answered, Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. That's my reading from Matthew chapter 15, 1 to 10.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Back
Wade.
to you,
Uh,
Mr. Chairman,
just a
and
second,
I
sir, before
will
uh,
graciously excuse myself.
Mr. Wade, before you leave, Would you care to take at least a minute or two to give a public announcement in terms of traffic accidents and things that's
Oh,
going on
okay.
in
Thank
Panama?
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the chairman had, Leonard had explained, because of certain circumstances and situation, I will excuse myself after I give 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because of what he's going to be introducing tonight, and because of certain matters in the court that I am involved in. But anyway, my people, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me this opportunity to, since the country is in election mode, I call on the Belizean people, voting populists, to exercise their rights, since election is called. Um, Go to the polls on March 12th, since election is called. Exercise your God-given right. Um, but I just want to say here that, you know the election that is going to be held is going to be an illegal election. Um, you know, the 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 prime minister, outgoing prime minister, insists on calling election. Um, he defiles our laws. So go to the polls, cast your votes, and the change will be on that ballot. Trust me, there will be the change. It won't be the People's United Party, and it won't be the UDP, because they are not the change. The change will be Belizean Justice Movement candidates, which is 7 of us, and the independent candidates. That will be the only change on the ballot on March 12th. So exercise your God given right, right? And again, like I say, it's going to be an illegal election. So, take whatever traditionally they offer you. Understand that there is money already being offered. I heard that today in a village, $100 for that village to vote for the PUP candidate. Take that money, like previous election, take the money, but this one, take that money and vote your conscience, vote for change, and send a clear message to this two-party system that you have had enough. They won't, they will not expect for you to vote against them, because traditionally you take their money and you vote for them, and then you suffer the next 5 years, right? So my plea to you now, this election, take their money and vote for the Belizean Justice Movement candidate and the independent candidates. That should give you a coalition government to form the next government to serve you. And that's the only way you will get rid of the two-party system. The power is in your hands. And on that note, I want to graciously pass the show over to the chairman. I want to
Thank you very
say
much, Mr.
good night
Thank you very much, Mr.
to my Belizean people, and good night, Mr. Chairman. And just speak your mind and Call a spade a spade. Thank you.
I'll try, sir. Thank you very much again, and like I said, I'm sorry, and I'd like to apologize to you on a personal basis for
All
making
good.
such a request of you because I know each of us on this show, we all have equal rights. We all have the ability to speak our own mind and words. We have our ability to communicate with whom we want without any regards to feeling offended on or for others to feel offended because we speak our minds. And therefore, I want to say to you, Mr. Wade, thank you for all you have done before and you will continue to do. But for tonight, please, I don't want my mud slinging, you know, get on you.
Thank you,
You
my
may have you
brother.
may have your you may have your own
Shoot,
opportunity when you will indulge in maybe having to do that yourself. But
shoot,
as of tonight, I want to
shoot to
take on the responsibility for whatever is it that I create. Thank you
Thank
very much,
you.
sir, again, and good night.
Thank you. And shoot to power always. Good night.
Amen. Belizeans at home and abroad, as we said earlier in the beginning of this particular show, show number 265 of the Belizean Affairs programs, being Friday, I normally am the chairman of the Friday night programs, during which we discuss constitutional matters, legal case law matters, and others. And in particular for tonight, I'm going to be all over the place. I will start out by saying that it appears to me that the Belize justice system, which we all have led to believe, have been led to believe, is a law and order system in which the laws of the land, as is stipulated in our Constitution under Section 2, subsection 1, that the Constitution is the supreme law of Belize. And if any other, that one word, other law is inconsistent with the Constitution of Belize, now you notice that I emphasize other laws being inconsistent with the Constitution of Belize. That is to say, we don't only have the Constitution of Belize as our laws, but we have the Congress or the House of Representatives being empowered by that very same Constitution to make other laws, such as the substantive laws that helps to govern the country, some of which can only be changed if you have a certain percent of the lawmakers then voting in favor of those particular laws, and you have other parts of the laws of our country in the Constitution that even the very legislator, as much as they are empowered to make laws, cannot tamper with or alter or modify at will. That is, that in some instances they can make or abridge some of those laws by coming to the people and putting those proposals in the form of a plebiscite or a referendum. And then there are other laws, or in some instances you can call them uh, the, I'm trying to remember the word. Okay, we call them doctrines. They're not laws that the legislator makes, but for all intents and purposes, they are doctrines that the Supreme Court In all lands that have laws that govern those lands, the Supreme Court, as the interpreter of the laws and the Constitution, have what you call doctrines. That is that whenever you have a certain kind of ruling on certain types of cases, and they go to the highest law of the land, those laws then become stare decisis or settled laws. And in some instances, those very settled laws or stare decisis laws, that is, that they have gone through the whole judicial process of our legal system and are then classified as, or sometimes are used as, the basic structure doctrines of the Constitution and of our legal system. You have the separation of power structure doctrines as another leg on which our legal precedence and premise is based on. And we have the common law, we have corporate law, we have international law, we have constitutional laws. And I may say at this point, for those who may not know, that our very Constitution sometimes, because of treaties that we sign under international jurisdiction, some of our local laws then become subjugated to those treaties' requirements, to the extent that sometimes some countries have to modify their own local laws to give precedence or, or, or priority to the international law of the wider community of humanity and those treaties to which sometimes our government officials or our country sign on to, as for example in the case of UNCAP and many others, such as uh, the law of the seas in regards to maritime areas issues. But I don't want to get into the weeds of discussing all those types of laws and, I want to stay down to the basic because I want to get personal, like I said, about what is it that ails me and what is it that this particular show I'm hoping will turn out to be about. So then, I go back to the issue of our Constitution of Belize being the supreme law of our land. And that the Supreme Court, when they make any ruling, is supposed to rule on stare decisis or settled law. And when there is no previous settled law, as in particular regarding to a particular set of circumstances or a particular case that is presented to our Supreme Court, and where there is no stare decisis or settled law, because maybe those issues have not been dealt with before in our court, therefore there is no precedence. The bottom line then becomes that the Constitution, as the supreme law of our country, should be deferred to in terms of what the Constitution is mandated or what the Constitution requires or what the Constitution specify as the precepts or the guidelines under which our governance and government is supposed to be operating. Because the preamble to our Constitution delineates certain facts, certain issues, and it requires that within the structure and the basis of the Constitution, those requirements that are mandamus requirements in the preamble are supposed to be put into the Constitution and enshrined therein. I'm using up a whole lot of different words right now, some of which is because we're dealing with a legal matter, and therefore that's the way I got to speak to these issues in order to be relevant in terms of the laws of the country. whereas I more likely am inclined to explain away some of these details and these terms or words that we use in the hopes that maybe the average person will understand what is it that is being referred to or what is it that's being discussed, or be able to gather at least a cursory knowledge or understanding about some of these issues. However, as I previously said, the law of our land, the supreme law of our land, is the basis and should be the basis at the final point of redress for any issue that comes before our Supreme Court. I'm talking about the Supreme Court of Belize. Most recently, we have had at least 6 cases or 6 rulings or decisions, specifically of which I'm referring right now, that deals with the election processes, procedures, protocols, and practices of our country that have all been violated, have all been, I would say, malignantly dealt with, and I would even say criminally dealt with. Because while some of the people that I'm going to make references tonight hide behind what is supposedly the laws of our land and the legal system that we exercise in our country, they hide behind these systems and laws and commit crimes under the color of law, which is another legal term or phrase. That is to say, because there are people entrusted with the laws of the country and or with the opportunity to make laws for our country, they create bastardized laws that bastardize our constitution, laws that are totally opposite to what the constitution prescribes. And yet they follow or they proceed to make use of these bastardized laws in the way they want to govern the country. And when anyone gets up and speaks to them about it or say anything to them about it, they want to feel like they're the ones being mostly offended, rather than the offense that they are committing against the people, populace, and country. Which is why I have no respect or regard for some of them. And then when I use phrases and terms to describe their conniving and treacherous and illegal and unconstitutional behavior, they say, well, I'm offending them. I'm talking bad about them. I'm talking, I'm misjudging them, or I'm bringing them into disrepute. I don't want to hear that kind of stupidness. Don't come crying no tears to me about you feel aggrieved or feel hurted more than the people that you're doing the damage to by your bastardized and illegal conduct or behavior. No citizen of Belize should have to take his hard-earned money out of his pocket that he has to use to feed his family, pays for his daily subsistence, and use that money to have to go and fight the government of the day in court to try and get the court to tell the government that they have to abide by the law, and therefore the Constitution as the supreme law of the land must prevail. Unfortunately, that is how it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, that is not how it is as of today that I'm aggrieved and making this particular series of statements here. Why? I'll tell you why. Our legal system has been compromised, have been bastardized. Our legal system is being used to oppress and suppress the people. While the politicians, they control and run roughshod over the people and take our treasury under their control to pay for their legal expenses, the people who try to sue them to conduct themselves in a constitutional way don't have the privilege of being able to use the purse to hide behind, and then use the purse as well to subordinate lawyers, judges, and others so that they can continue to violate the constitution of the country and the rights of the people. Those are the things that causes revolutions in countries. When people cannot get redress to the wrongs that is being done to them, they take up arms or they become personal with different individuals in the government. As a matter of fact, we have been having that kind of experience in Belize right now, where people are starting to shoot at our own police officers who are supposed to be peace officers, but are out there committing crimes under the color of law. And the system does not check them. Neither has the system been able to check our politicians when they commit crime against the society, other than when an election comes, if people are lucky enough to understand what the issues are and then vote these rascals out of office. But in most instances, once they're in government and they have the coffers, they spend the money until they don't have no money, and then they turn around and still want to raise taxes on the people when they are giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to special favored people who give them a little something as a kickback. No wonder our civil service is so corrupt to the point that the people at the head of the civil service, it seems like to me over the years, are the ones that have survived and are still in office, and all the new people that are coming in are seeing what's going on between the old people them and the new people that become corrupt too, and the cycle continues. The old ones leave, but the malpractice remains because they school the young ones that come in. Some of them come in idealistic, wanting to do right and do good. Belizeans, my brothers and sisters, I'm going out on a limb, and I'm going to say our system of governance should not be aiding and abetting criminals in our legislators or criminals in our cabinet or criminals in any of our governance entities, much less the court. Because, as I mentioned earlier, of the 6 particular cases or rulings or instances that I'm making my reference to, 1 out of those 6 was ruled partially correct, and the other 5 were totally bogus and out of order and unconstitutional, and I may say illegal at that. Because while I can tell you that if a judge comes from any other part of the Commonwealth to make a ruling in Belize, or is hired to come and work as a judge in Belize, and they have worked in other parts of the Commonwealth before, it does not mean that they're going to come to Belize and haul and pull the system in Belize or suborn the system in Belize to the point where their ruling is going to override and overshadow the Constitution of Belize. They come to work in Belize, and the least that would be expected of them is that they familiarize themselves with the local laws, customs, and practices, and the Constitution of the country, the specific country that they're in, where they're working. You get your legal training wherever you get it from, but your legal practice has to conform to the society in which you're rendering those practices. And you cannot be found or be seen to be operating outside of proper jurisprudence. That is to say, proper judicial temperament. I'm going to go out on a limb and say something else right now again. And to hell with who doesn't like it. I don't care. We have been silent and been acting as a bunch of yellow liver, unpatriotic, uh, uh, you know, like we're scared of our own shadows. We see what's happening right in front of our eyes, and we act with such level of contempt towards our own interests to the point where we just are disinterested. Now, of course, if it's something on TikTok, oh yes, everybody's interested. If it's something on YouTube, oh yeah, everybody's gonna, you know, come on, Belizeans or older folks. I can tell you, I'm a great grandfather right now, and my mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, and my great grandmother, whom I knew as well. I did not get to know my great grandfather. Those people, they were made from steel. They were not the most educated people in the world, but they were very conscientious, moralistic, ethical, and more than anything else, they were professional and they were law abiding. Don't tell me that in today's modern society we can trump those kind of concerns or those kind of levels of moral or ethics or whatever. We have the ability to, we have the skills, the knowledge, we are far more sophisticated and more learned than our ancestors. But what we don't have, what we don't have, patriotism. I can remember when in 1966, when Mr. Golson came back and told the Belizean people that the Guatemalan issue was being taken up by the Webster group, and the way they were planning and trying to settle the Belize Guatemala issue, which was really not a real issue, other than because Guatemala chose to make it an issue and or try to keep that particular um, claim to our country as an issue, because they always coveted the territory of Belize, which is why it stayed as an issue. And only two countries in the whole wide world back in those days voted against Belize to become independent. All other members of the United Nations voted for Belize's independence. But when Mr. Wilson came back and told us what was going on, all hell broke loose in Belize. People couldn't stomach and they couldn't accept what was being proposed. Now remember, that was just being proposed. Now we know that those very same proposals that we held back from being put into practice immediately back then are now being implemented little by little as we move along. And the younger generation has no knowledge or understanding or no ability to be able to be sensitized enough to recognize what is it that's happening. As a matter of fact, they don't have the time, or I shouldn't even say they don't have the time, because they have time to be on Facebook, as long as they are to the point where even their own lessons at school and their homework is being, messed up, then they should be able to find time for patriotism. Now, maybe I'm talking about that because I'm a old hag, right? Anyhow, the bottom line is that the 13 proposals and the 17 proposals, for those of you who know nothing about it, please do a little reading. It shouldn't take you too long on a weekend to pick up some pieces. In fact, we have research capabilities now that you can get on your own phone, sit down in your own house, or sit down outside on the veranda or wherever, and just go and study or find out or Google some of these points of interest in regards to Belize. So you can get to understand some of what's out there in the internet for free as regards to general knowledge about your country. Maybe after that you might be a little bit prouder to say you're a Belizean and have some basis to be able to have a conversation with other people and justify why is it that you feel like you have a right to call yourself a Belizean and be in Belize and hold on to that this territory as your country. But my concern is, as I said before, our country is being bastardized in more ways than one. As specifically in regards to the point that I raised a little earlier when I said that our very institutions of our courts are being bastardized. Why should a judge, for example, I'll not name the names, but I'll point out a scenario. A judge who comes from Africa, who worked for African Republic, whose president is a dictator, and this judge is going to come to Belize and make rulings in cases that are presented to him and her in one instance, for example, to the degree where they are going to suborn the laws of our country and our constitution to the bastardized will and unconstitutional demands of a prime minister and cabinet who are holding hostage our constitution and who are dealing with our constitution with no regards and respect for it. Who would hold the contracts of these judges over their head to not rule against the government if they don't want to lose their contract, or if they don't want to be having their contract aborted, paid off, and shipped out of the country before they are ready to take on another assignment somewhere else. That's the kind of nonsense that's going on in our country. We have a government that has a prime minister and other ministers, and in particular, I would say a particular attorney general who enjoys the privilege of working for a jackal that encourages him to bring pressure on the judges that they bring into the country under contract and have these judges being hauled and pulled by them to rule in anti-constitutional ways. As I said, maybe the learned black court people, judges, probably are used to that kind of ruling where they came from, and they have no sensitivity to realize that by ruling in that kind of manner and behaving in that kind of manner and exercising the powers vested in them as judges in that kind of bastardized way, that they are destroying something that is fundamental to our existence in Belize. We classify ourselves as the last bastion of true democracy, other than maybe Costa Rica in Central America, because of our legal system that comes from a foundation of over 1,000 years. Belize is not a republic yet. And until these jackals can figure out how to turn it into a republic, which is what their agenda is about, they should abide by the laws. But they prefer to work as scofflaws because why? Nobody grabbed them and put them in jail for breaking the law. But they can grab anybody that they feel like and send them to jail, even on a false pretext. I'll give you a simple example right now. For example, in this case where Mr. Enriquez and Mr. Logan was trying to help Mr. Enriquez to get the government to stop violate the Constitution and to follow the prescripts of the Constitution. We have the judge allowed the case to basically, for, all, for lack of another way of expressing it, throwing out the case because they don't want to rule on the substantive matter of the constitutional violation so as to give the government a black eye. So they step over the elephant in the room, which is the constitutional breaches, to try and get Mr. Ramlogan and Mr. Enriquez to answer questions, extraneous questions that lend no merits to the case. And then they speak to those issues, focus on those issues, and abort the case. That's a travesty injustice. That should not happen in Belize. We are not used to that kind of craziness there. And for as much as they think that not all Belizeans are lawyers or are smart enough as our smart lawyers to be able to understand and deal with the matters that some of our lawyers don't want to deal with. Why? Because some of them are actually beholden to the government because they have special contracts and they have, they are members of this and that and they are society people. So they don't want to find themselves in trouble, therefore they don't put any effort to protect and preserve our way of life and our constitution. They would rather work and cooperate with the government to bastardize our constitution and to go out there and tell the people that our constitution is not good enough. I don't know if it has been good enough to get us to where we are today. I don't see how come it shouldn't be good enough for them to obey it and take us a little farther down the road with it. Other than for the fact that they want to become their own head of state. So they try to encourage some of our people to be disdainful, disrespectful, and malicious towards the current head of state so that they themselves can be looked upon favorably to become the new head of state. In other words, they want to turn the country into a republic where they can be voted upon and they can grab the power, use, misuse, and abuse the power a lot more than they are currently doing under the present situation. And then with them being the head of state at that time, or any of them occupying that position, they will be accountable to nobody else other than themselves. They will not be accountable to the people because our people are not the kind of people that will rile up and demand justice, even at the end of a rope. So these people take us all for a bunch of fools because we are easy going. Now they come with the craziness one to have an illegal election, and the court was supposed to have been allowed to go through the processes to validate whether or not they were in violation, which they had already stipulated anyhow, that they acknowledged being in violation and that they wanted to enter into a special agreement so that they can go and remedy the violation of the Constitution. And then, after giving that assertion to the court, they turned around and they did not fulfill the requirements of that agreement. Then the so-called smart-ass judge will turn around and say, well, he don't want to hear about the substantive matter of the case because these people who are novice at legal issues and practice anyhow had made a terrible mistake in accepting the government's proposal for the government to go and remedy the problem. So therefore, that particular judge, could not help them. That as far as that judge was concerned, they caused a flaw to their own case, and therefore that judge will allow the government to continue violating the Constitution. Where the hell in the world do you have somebody who's supposed to uphold the law, who's supposed to rule according to law, is going to play hanky-panky with a government to allow that government to continue violating the Constitution when that matter that was brought to that judge was a constitutional violation that needed to be remedied? They don't want to hear about it. Get out of my court. You created a flaw in your own case, that excused me from me as the judge in that instance I'm talking now, that the judge came off with the idea, or at least projected the idea, that they were intolerant to the plaintiff and more accommodating to the government, believing the lies that the government was telling, instead of the judge do his homework, read the damn Constitution with all the other learning that he has, and come down on the side of the Constitution, even if it has to mean coming down against the government's prescriptions or attitudes or behavior. That's what the Supreme Court is there for people to have redress. So we don't need any judge that's going to be compromising our legal system and are going to be aiding and abetting and helping to corrupt the whole of our governance system. But the Prime Minister and the Attorney General and the rest of the cabal of scofflaws, they don't mind having such a judge available to them while paying them with our tax money at that, to disabuse of our own rights, or fundamental rights, or rights to vote. I recall a former Attorney General said, Belizeans don't have no right to vote. The poor gentleman apparently had studied law, and in the studies of law that he did, probably had been asleep when they were teaching about the Constitution of Belize, and or when they were teaching about the preamble of the Constitution of Belize, which both the preamble speaks about the right to vote in many sections, as well as demand that those particular sections was to be enshrined in our Constitution, never to be tampered with by the government except with a plebiscite and the authorization of the public to grant that permission to the government, or to grant that type of power to the government. And because the government finds itself hamstrung constitutionally, they want to eviscerate the whole damn Constitution. And a lot of people, when they understand or know about these constitutional issues, they just shake their shoulder and, so what? The government is supposed to be doing the right thing on our behalf, so let them go ahead and bastardize the Constitution any which way they want, because they are our government. But the Constitution to itself is a self-preserving document, and it spells out what the government can and cannot do. The government is not authorized or has any power to go beyond the four edges of the Constitution. Whenever they make any law in Parliament, it has to conform with the Constitution. Otherwise, under Judicial Review Section 20 of our Constitution, the Supreme Court can be sought for redress. And in any of those such cases, the Supreme Court have what you call I'm trying to remember. Anyhow, I forget the phrase, but it's a legal phrase. But it's like having the rights, the all-encompassing rights, and first, power of interpreting those laws, and of demanding redress to those laws. Okay? The government cannot write the Supreme Court out of existence. The government administrative part of the government, right, the executive, cannot one day decide, well, they're going to banish the legislator. Nor can the legislator go and make a law to say, well, okay, we don't want to have a government, we don't want to have a prime minister, we don't want to have or destroy any of the fundamental pillars of our governance. I have a lot more that I want to speak on those particular matters, but I take offense or umbrage, as it will be said, for any government officials, whether it be the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Home Affairs, any minister, including the Attorney General, who has a lawyer and a trained mind and supposed to be defending the government, should not be encouraging and giving the government bastardized interpretation of the law, to the point where he himself is conspiring with other outside lawyers who are receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from our treasury to help them fight against the rule of law in our country. I got an article here I want to read a little bit of. I'm within the time constraints, so I'll just defer a little bit from my rant, and if I have any time, I'll go back to it and clarify a little bit more of what is it that I was dealing with. But I want to read this particular essay that I wrote a while back. It's October 7th of 2023. It says, the following comments were made by Leonard Brackett as part of a Facebook post thread on LOO, or in other words, the leader of the opposition, Honorable Mr. Shine Barrow, who has made a comment about the Minister John Bisenyo shortcomings. And this particular one says, Belize PM Bisenyo, how much more, sir? Was the title of the essay in the form of a question with double emphasis. I'll reread that again. Belize PM Bisenyo, comma, how much more, comma, sir? I went on to say, this Honorable Prime Minister of Belize, Mr. John Bisenyo, has gone rogue. Basically, in bracket, I said, power drunk. And he has been mismanaging Belize's affairs for a long time now, with unchecked impunity and support from a super Belize parliamentary majority, most of whom are being deceptively conned, shortchanged, more so from members of cabinet, and also the members of the House. I went on to stipulate what should enable him to provide good governance, or in other words, because he has such a big mandate, then he should be able to provide good governance. And without needing to try on overthrowing the present system or current head of state, or attempt to abolish ultravirus and eviscerate the Belizean constitution. I also went on to say, which is why he instigated the creation of a reform commission, or in other words, later named People's Constitution Commission, to do his dirty, seditious work for him, so he can uh, so he can hold uh, he can hide behind let me see what I was saying here. To hide and hide his nakedness and his naked aggression against the Belize Constitution and people, to facilitate his devious and nefarious and malignant, cancerous uh, undertaking, yeah, that's the word, against patrimony and country of Belize. It's a very long article, by the way. So, well, no. This one is not long. Let me just close it out. I have one more paragraph to read, and I'll close it out. I got to keep an eye on my time. I have enough time so far, so let me continue. While recruiting Belizeans as sovereign citizens in his grand scheme or deceptive ploy to convene to converting Belize into the Republic of Belize as an independent, uh, defenseless pauper republic. In other words, he's not managing the country good enough to uplift the people out of the 68% poverty and to increase the economy of the country to the point where he can afford to pay the civil service money that is outstanding, as well as pay for a better defense of the country. But all they do is pull the system to try and get money out of the system for their own personal agendas and their own self-enrichment. And then they take lands here, there, and everywhere. In fact, they even steal lands from other private entities under the guise of eminent domain, for which our public treasury has to pay for those lands as well when they take them from private people. And they keep the land for themselves, and they spread it out to their family and friends, as what we saw happen in Bullet Tree, what we saw happen in Corozal, what we saw happen in Orange Walk, under the Minister of Health, Mr. Bernard, what we saw happen in Toledo East, under Mr. Whatever the gentleman name that just won there the other day. They carve up a lot of swaths of lands and build villages and give to all these people that they are importing and bringing into the country. They give them lands. They give them social security. They give them houses. They give them all kind of benefits, while the local Belizeans are sitting down at home, they're sucking their finger, having the need for some of these same very services, and are getting none of it. Their patrimony is being shared out to others, newcomers. And these idiots are going to stand in front of us and tell us that they are doing it because they want to. As if to say, well, what can we do about it? Because we are a minority in our own country. So now we're relegated to the bottom of the barrel. I'll leave that for right now. Let me not go any further with that particular item. I have here one other one that I thought I needed, or I would have liked to pursue. Uh-oh. And so I'm going to go ahead and pursue that one, since I have a little bit more time I have about 25 more minutes to go. So I'll indulge myself in this particular one because I know a lot of people are going to jump down my throat because of this one. But like I said earlier in the program, I'm hot under the collar. I need to speak to some issues that's not been spoken to by anyone else. And it's the silly season. So I'm going to indulge myself in some of the silly season activities of electioneering. And I'm going to read this one that was written on the 20th of October of 2020, I think it's 22, yeah, 20th of October 2022. I start by saying, Belize Constitution Reform Commission. Belize PM is hiding behind the frock or dress of this particular entity, the Belize Constitution Reform Commission. At the time, that's what it was called. They hadn't changed the name yet to the PCC, or the People's Constitutional Committee. Let me move this on. Belize lacks talent, is what the good gentleman had said. Or, as I further went on to clarify or stipulate, not only talent, but intelligence, aggregation, that is the ability to collect intelligence from other sources about other places and about your own country, and be able to decipher those intelligence, as well as to analyze and come up with proper conclusion that will benefit your country. That's what spies does. That's what diplomats and foreign agents do. But since, as the man said, Belize have no talent, I presume he was talking about all of those, which I would beg to differ from him, because I know that Belizeans not only have talent, but we have excelled. Almost any part of the world we have gone. That much history records. Uh, and by the way, I'm not talking off the top of my head, okay? I'm going to move out of the way so you could see I only one of the Belizeans there that have excelled. See all them certificates and diplomas and license and credentials and all kind of stuff behind me. Those are just some of what one Lee Bakaton Belizean has attained and achieved, including working on intercontinental multi-warhead missiles, right? And many other projects, multi-billion dollars projects on behalf of the United States Defense Department, for which as a civilian I was rewarded, which the US government doesn't do for civilians that much or too often. So I had one of them. We have a lot of doctors out here. We have a lot of engineers out here. Belizeans, by the way. And we don't only just have talent, we have the ability to be able to help our country move forward into the future. But for the knuckleheads who feel like they are threatened by those of us who have talent, that they don't want us to have much to do with the political affairs because they want to run that as their scam, as their hustle, and they don't want to be hollered at by anybody that could tell them where they're going wrong. They just want to have bogus elections, get elected, give the Belizean people one day fiesta or party, right? One couple of beer, one plate of food, and one $50. In fact, some of them get 100. And I've known of some of them that get 300 and up to 500. I've heard of some who get 1,000. I haven't seen or known of any of them. But the bottom line is that the Belizean people have allowed themselves and are in the process of allowing themselves again to go back and vote The same bunch of scoundrels that got them in the situation where they are presently. And because apparently they, well, I shouldn't even go there. Let me leave that part alone. Let me just try and read up a little part of the essay. I teased just now by reading what it was going to be about, and I don't want to spend the rest of the show just, you know, bantering and commenting and running off and, just let me get into the stuff and let me read it. So I'll just go ahead and read it. I said, item number 1. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, now this is a series of questions that I had, right? So I'm going to ask it in a question form. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, understands contextually the meaning and implication of the term or word sedition as imbued or used or outlined in the Constitution of Belize? One question. I'll proceed to read the second one. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, realizes or knows that neither he or any other officer or officials or Belizeans are above the laws or constitution of Belize and could be exposed to charges of sedition for seditious intents or activities? I'll proceed to question 3. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, abhors, that is to say, hates or disapproves or disagree with the Constitution of Belize as it as it currently is, and would he like to abrogate and capriciously make changes which is perceived to be his wet dream? I went on to a fourth question and asked the following. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, understands or realizes that the Constitution of Belize, as a living, self-preserving document, provides guardrails, protocols, procedures, processes, and practices for lawful and legitimate constitutional amendments or alterations thereto? In other words, instead of the bogus alterations that they are trying to make and or the evisceration that they are trying to commit, does he really understand that there are other premises available to probably get to some of the very same thing he's aggrieved about? But because apparently he has no talent, as he has stipulated that Belizeans don't have any, he's so hot on his own color that he's willing to violate the laws of the land with impunity at that, and continue to be a scofflaw and a congenital liar. Because whenever he's caught, he turns around and tries to blame his errors, omissions, and oversights. Or maybe in some instances, it's not even just an oversight, it's outright contemptible conduct on his part. He turns around and blames somebody else. He blames the teachers for being teachers. He tells the IMF that the reason why the schools are deteriorating is because the teachers are not qualified or competent. So he gets money from the IMF and other sympathizing governments over the world to help with the education in the country, to help with uh, electricity in the country, and many other projects, and the money disappears. When they are asked about it, they say, oh, well, they put it into studies, which is why we have no results, because they haven't spent any of it into the practical aspect of solving the problems. And money keeps disappearing out of the budget. The annual budget, which they're about to read another one now, if by the time the election is over with and they go to the House again, and the government, whoever is the government at the time of April 1st, will pull another All Fools Day on us. They'll read us a budget like all the previous ones, full of holes, full of promises, with no money behind it to back it up. And they keep going to the House after they put that budget in place, 3.5 billion or more, and they go back to the House to get supplemental almost on a monthly basis. That's the history. That's the trajectory that we have had so far. And part of the reason why they held this election long before November when it was really due. They have no cash flow. The last meeting at the House, before they dissolved the House, they went there to borrow another $200 million and to ask the Taiwanese then to help them keep in abeyance loans that were due, that they would not have the cash flow to be able to do. Why? Because they needed to use that cash flow for electioneering purposes, as it's happening right now. They want to buy themselves another 5-year term out of the treasury of the country. That's what it's all about. That's what's going on right now. And everybody is waving their flags and que viva this and que viva that and just rallying around, and it's their party, and therefore, their party can do no wrong. And after the party has its party with them, at the end of the election day, the votes would have been cast, the victors would have been declared, and the following day, after they have already had the party the previous day and eaten the food and drink the couple of beers and got them $50, the following day that $50 is already spent, when it's supposed to have lasted them for 5 years. Belizeans, please wake up. There's no time to be sleeping. I'll take the liberty of reading question number 5. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, really accept the limitations on his powers as Prime Minister of Belize, whilst not being Belize's head of state, who is, at the time when this article was written back in 2022, Her Majesty, the head of state was then Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, from whom he, the Prime Minister, had acquired assent of powers to govern Belize through the delegated authority of the Governor General. I'll read on to question 6. I still have a few minutes left to go, so just please ask for your indulgence and your forbearance so that I could just get through some more of this. I think my time is going to run out before I finish up the whole thing, and maybe I can just do the rest of it next Friday, since we usually deal with constitutional matters, which is what I'm dealing with right now, and the Prime Minister, and case laws. I didn't get into any of the substantive case laws that I wanted to deal with tonight, but I'll go ahead and read 6, please. Let me proceed. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, wishes Belize to dispense with all remaining British colonial vestiges that currently overshadows Belize's constitutional independence, as the previous and former prime ministers did. Number 7 reads as follows. Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, truly knows and understands what is the British High Commission and its purposes, functions in Belize? That is to say, as compared to a British embassy in other countries. A lot of our local Belizeans don't even contest these things or understand these things adequately. Such as to say, do they really understand the meaning or the difference between what we have in Belize and what we should have had if we were that fully independent? That is to say, if we were fully independent and exercising our sovereign rights to elect our own head of state locally, then we wouldn't have a British High Commission in Belize. Instead of an embassy, we would have an embassy, as most independent countries have. Guatemala have a British embassy. It doesn't have a British High Commission who lords over the Guatemalan government and presidency. El Salvador, the same. Honduras, Mexico, and all the other Central and Southern American countries. But we have something in common with Canada. That is that even though Canada is that much bigger than Belize, territorial-wise, population-wise, economy-wise, and in many other aspects, we still share the same head of state as Australia and as many others. The bottom line is, unlike these other countries, we have a peculiar form of independence. We're not an independent republic yet. We exercise some sovereignty, but it's on a conditional basis. And yet our people doesn't even recognize or understand that to be the fact. I'll proceed to read. Did I read number 7 already? Yes, I did. So I'll just go on to number 8, which is the last question in this series. And then I think I'm going to break off of that and close the show, because it's becoming a little monotonous, I think, for the general public. And I'll just have to postpone or defer the rest, which is quite long, by the way, and pick that up on a future occasion, probably next Friday, because Mondays and Wednesdays we have the other chairman, and it is their chance to, run whatever show they want to run. We don't dictate each other's show in terms of getting into the personal prerogative of choice of materials for the show. That's a matter of liberty among ourselves. I'll proceed then at 8, so I can round off the rest. This last question. Paragraph 8. It says, "Does the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable Mr. John Briceño, understands and realize that he cannot be found to be attempting to subordinate the Governor General of Belize? Why? He didn't appoint her. The Governor General serves at the pleasure of the head of state, not at the pleasure of the Prime Minister. But yet, there are instances in this particular present term, well, I shouldn't say present term because the term is finished for all intents and purposes. We're in the middle of an election. But the previous term, the government was trying to suborn even the head of state, even the representative of the head of state, the Governor General, because the previous government had their secretary of their cabinet act as deputy governor general and sign on behalf of the governor general, and the governor general did not uh, query into those signatures and made sure that those signatures were not anti-constitutional and or intended to eviscerate even her own position, which is what happened in one instance where the PCC was being assented to on behalf of the Governor General, on behalf of the head of state, basically to get rid of their existence in our constitution, because that's what that PCC Act was about. An act of treason, an act of treachery, an act to eviscerate our constitution in lieu of a new constitution that is more pliable to them, that will have them become the new head of state. So that was treason unto itself. And then they want to hide behind the garments of the population as to say, well, they're entertaining this type of uh, treasonous actions on behalf and by the consent and will of the people, which is why they went and changed the original Constitution Reform Commission to the People's Commission. In other words, fault the people for whatever is going on and what could transpire as a result of what's going on. To the point where these jackals even intimated, as in the instance of the Prime Minister and in the instance of the Attorney General, that the PCC Act that they had created, which was bogus, by the way, as far as the intent and the real objectives were, they were saying that because they have a PCC Act, they could not countenance having a referendum to deal with substantive urgent matters, because they had to wait till the PCC completed its exercise, which they have not as of today date that we're talking, and the election and the House has dissolved, and the government had been put into a caretaking status until the election is completed, for them to then maybe if they win go back and continue governance. That all that while they could not be obeying the constitution because they had a temporary transition process that hadn't had any validity in terms of the laws of the country or any power of law or lawmaking per se. And for that reason, they said they were not scoffing at the laws, they were not disobeying the laws, they were just suspending the constitution and the laws, which they were not abiding by, in lieu of waiting until this constitution reform or commission or PCC completes its work sometime maybe next term if they win the next term. For all that intent, they should have stayed home then. They shouldn't have been going to the House to ask for money every month and to create additional bogus laws, such as the enrichment law, such as the law that they went and tried to get the ASI, BSR business involved with. You know, all these guys do is scum job. They operate as a bunch of mobsters, as I said before. And now they are coming to the people, asking the people to give them another term. And mind you, the way it looks right now is that the people will give them another term. They didn't have enough the last time round. Give them another term now. And the man said he's going to comply with the Constitution maybe 2 years into the next term. Same promise he made in 2019, before they won. They won, they served that term out. They're now trying to get another term, and they're asking us to wait until they win, and maybe 2 years after they win, then they're going to think about doing something that should take the time to do in 6 hours. 6 long hours! That's how long and how hard and difficult. They can't come up with 6 hours to obey the Constitution but then come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars out of we coffers to defend the indefensible, which is to defend them complying with the Constitution, just to enrich their friends and their bodies. And Belizeans are quite satisfied with that, apparently, because they're about to give them another term. If you embolden them the first time to do what they did, what make you think that they're going to do any better if you give them another chance to continue on? It's your party, it's your government, it's your country. And if you love your party more than you love your country, hooray! Don't expect me to fall into that trap. So that I think that's the end of that one, if I'm not mistaken. Did I read the whole thing? Uh, I'll just defer for right now, because I want to close out on a small little rant. What we got here? Oh, that's it. I'm beyond my time. Well, I won't be able to go into that rant. I'll have to leave that for some other occasion. I just want to personally say to Belizeans at home and abroad, my brothers and sisters, thank you very much for indulging in this process, to at least give us some of your time to listen to what we have to say, even though sometimes we may not agree or you may not agree with some of what we say. Don't get annoyed with us, because all we're trying to do is our best. And the Constitution to which we subscribe says that all of us are entitled to our rights to speak, to think, you know, to communicate in whatever manner necessary or possible, our thoughts, ideas, and conclusions. That's part of our fundamental rights, along with many others, most of which are found in our Constitution from Section 3 all the way through Section 19. And for good redress of those rights, we have Section 20 for judicial review. So I want to say thank you very much for having spared your valuable time to hear what I had to say, and I hope that some part of it may accrue some positive public benefit to one and all. Thank you very much again, and God bless Belize and Belizeans at home and abroad. Good night. Uh, I did not took the chance to enumerate some of the people that were writing, but after the show is finished, I'll make sure that I try to communicate with some of them. Thank you very much, and like I say, good night again.